In this video, you're going to be installing Webpack into the boilerplate project, and you're going to learn how to configure it to work with our project structure. This is going to give us access to all sorts of awesome stuff like the JavaScript modules system, which I'm really excited to show you. Now, before we dive into anything and install Webpack, I want to show you where Webpack lives on the web. You can find it over at webpack.js.org. And the one page that I want to point out on this website is the documentation page. Right here, the documentation page is basically an entire website on its own. It outlines everything that Webpack can do. Now, we're not going to go through this documentation together since we're actually going to be moving through the configuration process as part of this course. I just wanted to point you in the right direction should you care to learn more. In this video, we're going to come up with the most basic configuration necessary to get Webpack to work. Then throughout the section, we'll be adding more things to our Webpack configuration to enable new features. To kick things off though, we do have to install Webpack in our project. It's an npm module, so let's go ahead and move in to the terminal. I'm going to use Control-C to shut down the serve script, then we're going to use npm install to install two new modules. Now I'm leaving off the G flag because we want to install these as local modules, not global modules. The first one is Webpack. We're going to grab the latest version, so Webpack at 4.5.0. The other one we're going to be installing is the Webpack CLI. That's Webpack-CLI at version 2.0.14, which is indeed the latest. Now we can go ahead and actually run the installation command. That's going to install both of them on our machine, and once we have them, we'll move into Visual Studio Code and start the configuration process. So like Babel, we have to tell Webpack where our code lives and where we want to save the generated code. We do this by actually creating a separate configuration file. So right here, Webpack did indeed seem to install successfully. We're going to go ahead and move over to Visual Studio Code, and we're going to create the configuration file that Webpack needs. So in the end of the day, we're going to be running Webpack via a script, just like we run Babel via a script. We can actually go ahead and create that script right now. The script name itself can be whatever we want. We can actually go ahead and use Webpack, and the value is just going to be running the Webpack command. Now you'll notice this is similar to running Babel without any of the arguments. Webpack actually allows us to create the separate configuration file, so we don't have to define a really long command here. Instead, we can create a JavaScript file, and we can set up an object that defines all of the things like where the code lives that we want to process and where we want to save the processed code. So let's go ahead and knock that out by creating a new file. This file needs to live in the root of your project, and its name needs to match up exactly with this one, webpack.config.js. This is where we configure Webpack, specifying the details of our project. The code we put in this file is eventually going to get processed via Node.js, so we actually need to take advantage of a couple of Node-specific features, which I'll walk you through. So bear with me through this Webpack configuration. The big picture goal is to create a configuration object, and we actually define this object on module.exports. Module.exports is specific to Node.js. This is how we can expose something from a given file, and in this case, we are exposing the configuration object. Right here, inside of the object, we can now start providing the configuration details. For our purposes, to get the basic configuration in place, we have to specify the input and the output. The input, also known as the entry for Webpack, is going to get defined first. So right here, we're going to set up our first property on this object, entry, and we're going to set entry equal to a string. This string is a relative path to the place where our code lives. So for us, that is inside of the source directory, and the file is called index.js. So right here, inside of quotes, it is ./source/index.js. And there we go. We have half of the configuration down. Webpack now knows where to find the code to process. The only thing we have to still specify is where to save the processed code. We can now add a second property onto our configuration object. This one is called output, and output actually doesn't get set equal to a string. it gets set equal to an object since there are a lot of different things we can configure about the output. For our purposes, we are going to configure just one, the path, and path gets set equal to a string. It contains the path to where we want to save the Webpack output. So for us, we want to save it in the public scripts directory. Now there is a catch. What goes inside of the path value needs to be an absolute path, unlike entry, which can be a relative path. The absolute path needs to start from the root of our hard drive and navigate all the way to the correct location. I've actually copied that value to the clipboard for my computer so we can have a quick conversation about this absolute path. So this is indeed the correct path. It starts all the way from the root of my hard drive, it navigates into my user folder, onto the desktop, into the JS Bootcamp directory, boilerplate, public scripts. It gets us all the way from the root of the hard drive to the final destination. The problem is that this path is subject to change. If I take the boilerplate project and move it from this folder to my documents folder, for example, the path is going to change. If I share this with a friend whose username isn't Andrew, the path is going to change. So we don't want to define this string right inside of here because that's not very flexible. It's pretty much going to break any single time we change the location of the project or someone else works on the project with us. What we want to do is provide an absolute path that's a bit more flexible. Luckily, Node.js gives us a good way to get this done. The first piece to the puzzle is a Node.js global variable. It's underscore, that's 2 underscores, dir name, which is short for directory name. And this provides the absolute path to the root of your project. So for our purposes with the Webpack config file, it's going to provide this portion of the path, all the way from the root of the hard drive up to the boilerplate folder. So we can get all of this, the stuff that's subject to change, with the dir name variable. All we need to do then is tack on this, which is never going to change because it's all part of the project structure. This portion is going to be the same regardless of where the project lives on my folder, or if I share it with someone else and they're on a different operating system or have a different user name. Now the value for path is not going to be as simple as just taking underscore dir name and concatenating something on, like for example, /public /scripts. This isn't going to work because of cross operating system issues with paths. Windows, Linux, and Mac have different systems for working with those paths. We need a universal way to get this done. Node.js gives us a few functions that allow us to get this done. Up above, we need to explore one more Node feature. What we're going to do is create a const called path. We're then going to load in one of the libraries that Node.js provides. This library gives us a whole bunch of utility methods for working with paths. We can combine two paths in a universal way. To get this, we use the require function, and we pass to require a single argument, a string, and we provide the name of the library we would like access to. The one that we're going to be accessing is called path. So now we have access to this path library. Path right here is just an object with a bunch of methods on it. Down below, we're going to go ahead and use one of those methods. It is path.resolve, which is going to allow us to combine those two pieces to come up with the final absolute path. Right here, we pass in two arguments. The first is underscore dir name. The second argument is public /scripts. And there we go. We now have an absolute path that's going to work in all operating systems. And with this in place, we actually have our basic configuration all set up. We can go ahead and save the Webpack config file, and we can save package.json, and we're going to go ahead and move into the terminal and actually run that Webpack script. To kick things off, I am going to use clear to clear the terminal output. Right here, we're going to run npm run Webpack to run our Webpack script. When this runs, it's going to run the Webpack command. That is going to grab our Webpack config file because it's in the root of the project and it has a specific name Webpack is looking for. It's then going to be able to access the configuration object and actually run everything successfully. Over in the terminal, I'm going to hit enter. That is going to run Webpack, and we're going to get a whole bunch of confusing output. So in the end of the day, what happened here is a successful build. Webpack was able to run correctly and then actually created a new file in our project. This file lives in the folder we specified, and by default, it's called main.js, but this is something that we can go ahead and configure. Before we worry about configuring that and changing it over to bundle.js, let's go ahead and talk about the output we're seeing here. So the first few lines aren't important for our purposes. First up, we have the hash specific to this build. We then have the version of Webpack we're using and the amount of time that it took to actually run through the build. Here, it was about 1/3 of a second. We also have some information about the date. What's more interesting is down below. We have the output from Webpack. Here, it was able to create the file main.js successfully. And then down below, we can see where main.js got its code from. It got it from the index.js file in the source directory, which means that everything is working correctly. Now, there is a warning down below about one piece of missing configuration. We're going to tackle that in just a little bit. It's just a warning. It's not an error, so we don't have to address it for the moment. But don't worry, we will indeed address it. What I want to take a moment to do is crack open the new file created by Webpack. Over here, that is main.js. And if I open that up, I can see that Webpack has done a few really nice things for us. The first thing it's done is it has minified all of our code, making it as small as possible. This makes it very difficult for humans to actually read it, but it makes things much faster when a computer is processing it by reducing the total number of characters in the file. So this is the code that we're going to end up running from the browser. Now, with this code, we have access to the modules system, and that's what we're going to explore in the very next video. Before we go and dive into that, I do want to show you how you can change the name of the file that's spit out. Over in webpack.config.js, we can add another property to the output object alongside of path. I'm going to put a comma at the end of the path value. Right here, the one we're going to specify is called file name in all lowercase. We set file name equal to the name we want to use. We can go ahead and switch that over to bundle.js, which used to be the default name in Webpack. It's now switched over to main.js, though honestly, you can pick whatever name makes sense for you. And now we can go ahead and delete both of those files. Bundle.js is going to get deleted, and I'm also going to delete main.js. And over inside of the terminal, we can now rerun that Webpack script. When we do this, we are going to see a single file created. This time, though, we have customized the name, and over inside of the scripts directory, we can see we now only have one file, bundle.js. And that's where I'd like to stop for this one. We now have Webpack configured, and we have this brand new file being created, though we haven't actually used any of the new features of Webpack, and we haven't even executed the new bundle.js file. But don't worry, with the configuration out of the way, in the next video, we're going to spend the entire video exploring the new JavaScript modules system. I am super excited to get to that, so let's go ahead and jump right into the next video and take a look at this brand new feature.